Hello and welcome to the big picture. Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Pakistan on what's being described as a historic visit, the first by a Chinese president for several years. In normal circumstances, this should not have aroused any serious curiosity or concern, considering the fact that Pakistan and China have been close to each other for decades. However, President Xi's visit this time has evoked a lot of concern and curiosity because of the 51 agreement signed and huge funding announced by China to Pakistan. The biggest deal concerns a 3,000 kilometers long China-Pakistan corridor for which China is pouring 46 billion US dollars. This is supposed to be the biggest overseas investment announced by China yet. This corridor, incidentally, will run through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and will give access to China into the Indian Ocean too. The implications of this corridor and its strategic importance to China is being seen in India as a matter of concern. Today we will discuss the increasing strategic relationship between China and Pakistan and whether this should be a matter of serious concern for India. To discuss this, I have with me Vivek, Katju, former ambassador, Rana, Banerjee, strategic affairs analyst and former special secretary at the Cabinet Secretariat, Radha, Kumar, Director General, Delhi Policy Group, Vinod, Sharma, political editor, Hindustan Times, and on the phone line from Islamabad is senior journalist and political analyst, Imtiaz. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Gul, I would like to come to you first. How is this visit of the Chinese president being viewed in Pakistan? Is this the biggest thing which has happened as far as the China-Pakistan relationship is concerned?
Well, I guess this is something unprecedented in view of the sort of international economic isolation and political isolation that Pakistan has been experiencing at least for the past decade or so, and particularly because foreign investment has been shy of Pakistan. Nobody wants to risk their money in a country which has this perception of being security-wise volatile. So in this context, this visit has assumed unusual importance, also particularly because this fits very much into the concept of economic corridors that President Xi Jinping has been peddling as part of his strategy to help expand China westwards through economic corridors, a Eurasia line, a Eurasia land line, as well as this Myanmar, India, China, Bangladesh corridor, and the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So this way, yes, this has been an unusual visit the past 2 days.
Is it being seen as only an economic partnership? There are also some strategic partnership involved. There's some deals as far as some of the defense equipment and all is concerned?
Well, I think all countries all over the world are busy procuring weapons, defense systems from wherever they can. And Pakistan, China defense deals are not unique. Neither should they, I guess, arouse any concern or suspicion. Look around and then you will find every country involved in this. So, and China, Pakistan have traditionally been cooperating in defense, also in the nuclear technology, transfer of technology. China is putting up a couple of nuclear power plants in northern Pakistan as well as in the south of Pakistan. So I think this is an ongoing relationship which has been really cemented through this 2-day visit, which also becomes an expression of China's interest in the region, in Pakistan, as well as China's commitment to Pakistan, which is, of course, driven also by China's own energy needs and access needs to the west of its Xinjiang region.
Okay. Mr. Katju, how would you look at this? It's one of the biggest things which has happened between the two countries, isolation of Pakistan in the last decade or so, and now this coming through.
The Chinese-Pakistani nexus has...
You want to call it nexus, not relations?
It is a nexus if you see the history of the relationship and the target of the relationship. Indeed, if you see the whole rationale of the relationship and how it originated, the word nexus is the only word that can describe it. The nexus has always posed a strategic challenge to India. That is a fact which to my mind is undeniable. Now, that challenge will assume a new dimension. Why? The corridor that is being built will have to be defended once trade flows, energy flows start taking place, given the vast investment, given the importance of this corridor for the development of Xinjiang and Western China. The Chinese will have to move assets to defend this corridor. Now, once that takes place, then if India is not likely to gain access to this corridor, because the corridor is a two-way process, then how else can you describe it but as a strategic challenge to India? Will the Pakistanis ever allow India to gain access through this corridor to Afghanistan, to other parts of Central Asia, because the corridor will radiate,
or even to China.
Or even to China. Now, if that is available, then perhaps we can take a look at it in a different way. But so long as, and I see no evidence that that will happen, so long as the Pakistanis insist that India will not gain access to this corridor, what else is it but a challenge? And we'll have to monitor it very closely.
Banerjee, is it a strategic challenge?
Yes, I would think so, but we should not be so much concerned or, look at it with such a sinister vision. The sheer logic of economic development and if the various projects take off, the viability of Pakistan's economy would generate a sort of momentum where, our effort to ultimately have also the trade route open to Afghanistan would acquire some impetus. And assuming that this whole effort is a boost in the arm for the political fortunes of Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who also remains a trader at heart or a businessman at heart, I don't think that he would necessarily look negatively at this. Of course, the establishment or the military establishment of the state in Pakistan may take some time to adjust to the reality of allowing India a toehold in. So, to that extent, I would agree with Vivek. But we need not look at it with such sinister concern.
Okay. Radha Kumar? Radha Kumar, do you think that, Pakistan needed this boost very badly? It has been in a very bad shape all these years. Now that China has come forward and is, going to be investing such huge amounts there, if the economic conditions in Pakistan improves, will it not help in the improving of relations between India and Pakistan? The concerns of Mr. Katju aside.
It will help in improving relations between India and Pakistan. No, economic improvement on its own doesn't necessarily make somebody a better neighbor. So that particular issue I don't think is proven. Of course, it's a net good for Pakistan if their economy does improve as a result of this series of investments. And we must bear in mind, of course, that both China and Pakistan are sovereign and have the right to make any bilateral agreements that they wish. I would point out, however, two things. First of all, this defense deal of selling 6 submarines is, I don't really know why it has been joined up, and it would have been better if these two had been quite separate and possibly negotiated or announced at separate moments. That is certainly an issue that India has to pay attention to, given that the submarines are, well, most of the Pakistani military acquisitions are targeted at India. It should be also remembered that the US has just finalized or approved a large series of defense sales to Pakistan. Now, the I would say that the timing of the defense agreements are very unfortunate. Given given that Lakhvi has been released and is on bail, given that Hafiz Saeed is making incendiary speeches, and given that the Pakistani political and military establishment are doing very little to tackle the open targeting of India, rhetorically at any rate, by militant groups, not to mention actually as well, or directly as well. This timing only gives a sense of impunity, perhaps, to the militants, and further actually gives a sense of impunity to not only the militants but their backers as well. That is another concern that we should have. I believe that given that China is saying that they would like to participate in the development of Chabahar, which India, Afghanistan and Iran have been negotiating and have more or less concluded on, India has good grounds to say to China that it would be helpful if the Corridor 2 were allowed to link up with India, just as it is being considered that it will link up to Afghanistan as well. And I think that not only do we have good grounds, we should state this fairly clearly and request it. Whether we get it or not, and what the Pakistani resistance will be, is a separate matter.
Okay.
Finally comes the question of disputed Kashmir.
Exactly.
You know, if these investments in a corridor through disputed Kashmir actually help to stabilize that situation, if China takes its concerns about the spread of radicalism also to the spread of radicalism against India in these areas, then perhaps that's an issue that we can look at.
Okay. Vinod?
Well, I have a different take on this. Yes, of course, it's something which India has to be very worried about. And for me, the reasons are different. Yes, of course, it was in 2013 that Gwadar control passed over to a ports holding company in China from the Singaporeans, you know. And thereafter, since then, this
corridor will lead to Gwadar
Port. Yes. So since then, this corridor has been, the plans for this corridor have been in the air, and now there is a formal agreement. So it's not that something that must have taken India by surprise. We have been aware of this, and we have been registering our concerns. But during the recent visit of President Obama to India, there was a shift in Indian policy on Indian Ocean and Asia Pacific. And there were specific mentions about South China Sea, which is an area of contention insofar as China is concerned, Vietnam is concerned. And there's a Japanese problem as well. And we have gotten closer very ostensibly to these countries besides the United States. Now, I view this corridor as the Chinese plan to access the Arabian Sea and through it the Strait of Hormuz, which is the place from where most of the fuel supplies come and go out. And this takes care of their overall concerns to make themselves energy secure, because they are an economy which is growing. And though we may say that it's growing at a lesser pace now, but even if it grows at a lesser pace, it grows thrice the volume of Indian economy, given the size of their economy per se.
So what are you trying to say?
So what I'm trying to say is that it is not a cliche anymore that there is a string of pearls in South Asia, which China has woven around India. Hamban Tota is there, Chittagong is there, and our Chabahar effort is not going to counter. It's too feeble an effort to be able to put up a robust challenge or robust negation to what China is trying to do in order to encircle India. And this is a wider Chinese game plan to which the Indian diplomacy, I'm sorry to state, hasn't really measured up till now. Now, let's come to Kashmir. You see, it quite clearly drags China into the Kashmir dispute.
Right.
It was already there because a huge territory was ceded to China in the Gilgit-Baltistan area which is earlier called the northern area, by the Pakistani side in lieu of some other territory which they got. Now, this corridor, when it will run through Azad Kashmir or Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, depending on which side you're speaking from, I think that it will create serious security problems for India. As Ambassador Katju very rightly said, remember when there was a huge problem of the Taliban and there was a huge problem in Afghanistan, the Russian troops were just across the Amu Darya, in order to secure their interests, The same thing is going to happen in China, that the Chinese troops will be right there, at your doorstep, in order to secure their assets, A. B, you see, since 2005, when the earthquake happened in Pakistan, and thereafter there was in 2009 an executive order by the Pakistan government, which is called the Gilgit-Baltistan Empowerment and Self-Governance Order. The very character of that order is to help encourage Chinese presence in that area. And there have been investments by China since 2005 running into millions. Now it has escalated into billions. So you will have to face the Chinese military might, the Chinese economic might, and the Chinese diplomacy.
Absolutely. Let me get, otherwise I want Mr. Katju. So all this has been, as Vinod rightly pointed out, this is not something which happened overnight. It's been happening, it's been planned for a long time. How has Indian government, been able to respond to this, and how will it have to respond to it now?
Well, the Indian government knows about this. It's not something new. And I'm afraid the response till now of India, and this is not a case of this government or that government, it's a case of our security interests. So the Indian government's, successive government's response has not been adequate.
It's not been adequate?
No. We'll have to now, even though it may be a feeble effort, as Vinod is saying, we will have to invest far more time, resources, and pay more attention to the development of Chabahar. After all, you'll recollect that the road in Afghanistan to link up Chabahar, the Zaranj-Dilaram road, was built by India, and it was paid for in Indian blood. We lost boys there. So, some infrastructure has already been put in. Some infrastructure has to be put in. As far as the ports are concerned, we know this.
No, but what about Radha's point that, we will now have to, as far as Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran line is concerned, where does this come into the play? How can India play on that?
No, play on the Chabahar aspect.
Yes.
No, the Chabahar aspect, the driver in the driving seat, it has to be Iran and India. Afghanistan doesn't have the resources to invest. So that is something we have to urge the Iranians to sort out their internal problems. They have internal political problems, among others. They have a vested interest to adhere to the Bandar Abbas Islam Kila route. So we've got to address those issues also. But the fact is that we've got to be clear in our mind, first of all, that we face a nexus. Part of the Indian, just 1 minute. Part of the Indian strategic community is aware of this. For example, it is said that the Sino-Indian border is tranquil. Of course it is. The Chinese don't need to create any activity there except here and there to register their presence. They have their client, and it is a client, Pakistan, to cause all the trouble. So we've got to be clear in our understanding, and we can't be wishy-washy on this.
No, but this strengthening of what you call the nexus, does it have to do with India's increasing proximity or perceived proximity to the US? And he was talking about, the South China Sea and all these things.
I think the Chinese are somewhat of a deliberate people. They had decided on this corridor because, among others, their domestic reasons. They have a Uyghur problem in Xinjiang. They need the development of Western China. The whole demographic complexion of Western China is changing, or has changed in fact. And no one has said a word. No one has pointed fingers to them while all this has been going on, as in Tibet. So, given all this, I don't think any step India could have taken, and which has been fairly recent, with regard to the game, the larger game that is being played in Asia, which would have contributed to these agreements. After all this predates the game that is now unfolding. And in this game, well, I think India has to seek like-minded people whose interests coincide with India. No, like-minded in the sense of interests coinciding with India.
Okay. So I quite agree with Ambassador Katju here that India has to have options. And of course,
I'll come to you, Imtiaz.
And of course, when India went along with the joint statement with President Barack Obama on the South China Sea and the Asia Pacific and Indian Ocean, they perhaps knew that there was something in the pipeline of this nature. And now, but we are late starters in this game.
Okay.
And I don't know how quickly can we, cover the lost ground.
Okay. Radha, would you like to come in now, or I want to go to Imtiaz before I come in, before I come to you? Let me first go to Imtiaz. I'll come to you after that. Imtiaz, how do you look at all these things?
Okay.
Mr. Katju's statement that the nexus between Pakistan and China and it being seen as a threat to India.
Well, I would say that the very characterization of China-Pakistan relationship smells a rat, when he tries to run it down to a nexus. This also reflects the pick and choose mentality approach to different issues. When China, for instance, talks of a corridor running through Myanmar, India and Bangladesh, so that is perfectly all right. But when the same thing happens in the case of Pakistan, so it becomes a nexus. Secondly, when India, for instance, enters into defense deals or strategic deals, the way Vinod Sharma was talking about, that's perfectly fine. It's in self-defense. But if there is a talk of some sort of acquisition for Pakistan from China, then again, it's something that should cause alarm. I would say that I think most of the talk that I've heard from my respectable Indian friends is sort of very alarmist, still very much rooted in the Cold War era. And why must we always be security-centric, strategic-centric? Here we had the Chinese president whose entire strategy, entire focus is on expanding the road networks, the maritime networks, in order to facilitate the flow of trade and people across the entire region. And he's talking of reaching as far as to Denmark through these economic corridors. And here we have our honorable guests who still think that the Indian government is not doing enough to counter what they consider as the emerging threats from this economic corridor to India.
Just one question.
Imtiaz, Mr. Katju has a question to you.
No, Imtiaz, will India get access to this corridor through the Wagah route? That is a simple question. Will we get that access?
No, Ambassador, I'm not a spokesperson for the Pakistani government. All I'm saying, if the same China, which is also planning to have a corridor through India and which has become the largest trading partner of India, why would it not prevail upon Pakistan to allow India the same kind of access through the economic corridor that China is greatly investing in? So we should be a little open-minded.
Okay, Imtiaz, I think you have a point there. Let me get Radha in on this. Yes, Radha?
I certainly believe that it is worth talking about extending this route to India for two reasons. One, of course, it will benefit trade across the region, including for Pakistan. And therefore, it should be considered a net good in itself. And the other is that Afghanistan really does need this access, and this corridor would be an additional way for Afghanistan to get access, and obviously a much cheaper route than Chabahar, though Chabahar for its own sake must be persisted with, and Chabahar offers both Afghanistan and Central Asian access, which will remain a permanent gain again for the economy of the region.
Okay.
Having said that, I wanted to stress one point solely as far as the Indian government is concerned. The Indian government has a number of infrastructure projects across the east, north, west and south of India, which are all in a stagnating position. And frankly, for the government of India, what is important is to implement and deliver now on the projects that we have.
Okay. Mr. Banerjee?
I would like to, at this stage, flag also some problems that may
would you agree with Mr. Katju on what he said?
No, as I said, I have my qualifications. I mean, there can be good emerging from this corridor. But yes, India's traditional security concerns would be there. But in actualizing this project, there will be several problems which both Pakistan and China will face up. And we have to flag these also in terms of monitoring the progress. For instance, the alignment of the corridor, whether it would be through the Dera Ismail Khan in Balochistan or whether it would be through Sindh and Punjab, what implications or fallout it has on nationalist sentiments if it doesn't go through, Dera Ismail Khan in Balochistan for security reasons, and it goes through Punjab. This will accentuate the feeling of,
isolation
or, repression by the Punjabis. Also, there is a problem of Gwadar itself. The water supply in Gwadar is a serious problem. The association of locals in projects there has, raised resentment because there have been such few offers of employment opportunities to the Baluch. So these problems will come up. Also, the safety of Chinese engineers and workers all along the corridor, right from, the areas in POK or Gilgit-Baltistan, right down to Balochistan. There is talk of Pakistan having to invest in a separate security force only to look after the concerns of the Chinese workers. And if something happens to the Chinese, then there will be all hell to pay.
Okay.
So these are some of the problems that will come up.
Okay. Mr. Katju, I'll come to you, Vinod. Mr. Katju, now that the Prime Minister, Indian Prime Minister is going to China, how is he going to deal with this situation? But as Mr. Imtiaz Gul says, that or Radha Kumar suggests, can this corridor be extended to India? Is that the way the Indian Prime Minister can approach this issue?
No, I think that is the test of whether the Pakistanis are willing to
or the
open
Chinese.
Up, or the Chinese. The Chinese, I think, would be. But whether the Pakistanis are willing to open up trade with India. Here is a country which has consistently refused to open the land routes. Karachi, yes. For that we know the difficulties involved. But they have consistently said no. Afghan goods can come from Afghanistan to India. The trucks return empty. Now, is it conceivable today? Wishful thinking, yes, is a good thing to do wishful thinking. But is it conceivable today that the Pakistani army, and it is the army, it is not Nawaz Sharif who matters, that the Pakistani army will allow that? If it does, then it's a game changer.
Okay, Vinod, quickly, we're running out.
There is one entity in this world which exercises maximum influence of the Pakistan army is the PLA. And it has historically supported the Pakistan army all the while. The current president of China, Xi Jinping, has deep roots in PLA. And he can pull it off. And I think the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, he has his task cut out for him now. And I think that we expect the government to say something on this subject before the Prime Minister leaves for China. And surely when the Prime Minister is back, we will get to hear more on this issue from the Chinese. But coming to what Imtiaz Gul said, Imtiaz, the reality is that in diplomacy and in statecraft, there is no generosity. Now, yes, of course, whether it is an economic face-off or a military face-off, every country covers its planks and does its things, So there is nothing to get upset about this.
Okay, Vinod, we completely run out of time, but there's been a very interesting discussion. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be going to China next month on May 14th, I'm told, and we will wait and watch what will happen when that visit happens. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.